Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, we're playing Dragoon, and once again, I felt compelled to do an extra large amount of roulettes as we had quite a lot of Guildhests again. I'm suspecting that the problem is the time of day that I'm doing my Mentor Roulettes. In the afternoon before the daily reset makes perfect sense that a lot less varied content would come up, and would also be a convenient time to spam Guildhests for someone who wants some commendations, as there isn't much else to do at that time. Right? Or what? I will probably try some other times of the day looking forward as best I can. With that said, for this set, we had over 50% Guildhests, but at least the other stuff here is also good. For our first duty, we start with Hero on the Half Shell, and shocking no one, not much exciting happens here. For duty 2, we have enemy parties, and obviously this is the most exciting duty you could ever possibly imagine, and I'm totally not joking. Right? For duty 3, we are going to the second trial of Dawntrail, so if you don't want to see that, jump to this timestamp here. With that said, we went to Everkeep, and before we even had a chance to say anything, someone left, which then motivated others to leave as well. Remember, if one person leaves, then all subsequent leavers incur no penalty for leaving. I am kind of disappointed that so many first-timers will have this experience of going into a boss fight for the first time excited, and when they go in, half the group leaves because they can't be bothered. Not even a single attempt is given, so it isn't about whether it's hard or not, they just can't be bothered. Anyway, we waited for replacements for about 3 minutes. The thing that sort of worries me the most about sudden leavers whenever something hard comes up at all is that, combined with the amount of Guildhests I'm seeing recently, I'm wondering if these leavers were specifically hoping to land in a Guildhest and just can't be bothered to do quote-unquote proper content. Anyway, for our first attempt, not much special happened in Phase 1. Around halfway through Phase 2, we have a healer die to getting repeatedly hit, racking up vuln stacks. I suspect they might have had latency issues as they eventually disconnected. When we went back into the small arena, Blade Warp caused a lot of problems. I was trying to use a strategy to figure out the safe spots quicker that I haven't quite figured out well enough to put into words yet, and others also got hit, leading us to having only one healer alive. Just as the second healer goes down, the first one receives a raise, but it took almost 30 seconds before the raise was accepted. Maybe they were expecting us to wipe, or concerned about dodging the stack marker. After that, Volok comes in and somehow I confuse the side of one of the syncs, and with 2 vuln stacks, that is just not survivable. I go down alongside both healers unfortunately, and the rest of the DPS go down in short order. The 2 tanks actually try extremely hard to make it work anyway, and have good teamwork of alternating who tanks as well. The saddest part is that I think the moment where failure was guaranteed was when the Paladin decided to use Hallowed Ground for the double tank buster. Should have saved it to maybe take the next multi-stack marker. Either it would focus the Paladin and they could just take it with invuln, or it lands on the warrior and at least the Paladin will continue the fight. Maybe. As we wipe, the Paladin leaves and we need to find replacements again. We also end up replacing the disconnected healer and the other healer, which hilariously causes us to replace double White Mage with double Sage. When we finally get our second try underway, I start my opener by promptly pressing my battle litany wrong so it doesn't get used so my opener starts awkwardly. And as we close in on the same mechanic that got us earlier, I somehow misread the Volok blades again, especially despite everyone else getting it right. For some reason, I saw them opposite as they actually were. We did succeed, however. For duty 4, we have Under the Armor. Oh no, not this again! For duty 5, we also have Under the Armor. I get the impression it's our healer who's targeting commendations. For duty 6, we once again have Under the Armor. I want you to understand that I intentionally speed leave the instant the duty is over, intentionally, as it means I left too fast to possibly give or receive commendations. For duty 7, we have Under the Armor yet again. The good news is that we have already gone through half of the Guildhests in today's set. For duty 8, we are doing one of the new normal raid bosses of Dawntrail. If you don't want to see that, jump to this timestamp here. With that said, we went to M3N, the Brute Bomber. This fight went very well, and we only had one death, with one of the healers going down near the end. For my own mistakes, I once or twice throughout the fight accidentally did the Heaven's Thrust combo twice in a row, which leads to my damage buff running out. Aside from that, I'm quite pleased that I didn't get hit by any of the mechanics. A particular mechanic I can give some advice on for melee DPS is both Brutal Lariat and Lariat combo. For Brutal Lariat, when there isn't time to do any more GCDs before the Lariat finishes, start making your way to the other side of the arena. You can even use your gap closer once he's done. This can minimize the amount of time your GCD spends ready. For Lariat combo, my best advice is to stay near the original starting point and wait for him to come back, while throwing ranged attacks. If you feel you have plenty of mobility options, you can also use a gap close as he passes and then something like Elusive Jump just before the second Lariat, so you are closer to the original starting point when he finishes. I felt the mechanic came up too frequently for my Winged Glide to hold up, but if I had done it a few more times with Dragoon, I might have found a way. For Duty 9, we went to O12N, Omega M and Omega F, and this was an amazing performance actually. I don't think anyone died at all, which is almost unheard of in this duty. A particular mechanic that I usually get worried about is the knockback when Omega F materializes, as at least one person just does not get it, usually. It also doesn't help that the stack marker often makes players feel compelled to put it closer to the center, which ultimately reduces the length you have to get knocked back on. Not that you need more than half of the arena, but still. For my mistakes, there was at least once where I did the full thrust combo twice in a row, which causes the damage buff to run out. There was also a point where I opted to wait with my 2-minute burst cooldowns until the 1-minute burst cooldowns aligned with them. This is not optimal, and you would probably be better served to use everything on cooldown when something like this happens. But it might be easier if you're trying to learn a fight or the job if you make sure the burst is consistent. For Duty 10, we have Guildhest enemy parties again, with Imogen, which we saw in the Duty 3 trial from earlier. For Duty 11, we have Under the Armor again, and Imogen. It also turns out they know the channel. Wow! For Duty 12, we have Under the Armor yet again, but you probably noticed this particular healer has been in pretty much all the Under the Armor runs in this set. Their choice, of course. For Duty 13, we are back in O12N against Omega M and Omega F as an 8-minute replacement. They had a case of one wipe and then leave us. They said what went wrong was an unfortunate mistake with overlapping a spread marker and a stack marker. Oh well, we'll get them this time. Although, we almost immediately find reason to wipe it. Stack marker overlapping with circle AoE. The stack marker doesn't come out to a safe spot in time, so the 3 players in it promptly die. When Omega F comes out, 2 more players go out to the knockback, really emphasizing the F in the chat in Omega F. We decide to wipe it up and try again. On the run back, we also have some close calls with one of our tanks getting knocked out a bit. We also have this point where the Omegas are a bit too close to each other, making it very dangerous to deal with the knockback correctly. But once those issues are overcome, we managed to make it through. For my mistakes, there was this one time where I used Wheeling Thrust instead of Fang and Claw, breaking my combo completely. For Duty 14, we went to the level 100 MSQ dungeon, so if you don't want to see that, jump to this timestamp here. With that said, we of course went to Alexandria, and let me tell you, like being offered water in a desert, this was much more fun than I normally feel dungeons are. With 2 other jobs with raid buffs in the group, I spent most of the duty trying to figure out how to best align my buffs with theirs. This led to various weird and rather specific quote-unquote mistakes. First, on the first boss, I used all my cooldowns shortly before the boss died. Everyone else held theirs for the next pull. Later, I used nothing during a pack before the second boss to make sure my cooldowns aligned with the group. This is also not optimal at all, by the way. And near the end of the second boss fight, I decided to use my 1-minute burst, since surely it'll be ready by the next pull, right? Not exactly, but close enough. Overall, the duty went great. For Duty 15, we went to Guildhest enemy parties, and the only thing I have to talk about at all here is that it looked like the tank was single-targeting mobs sometimes. Might as well mash AoE all the time here, right? Imagine if you had one as a melee DPS. Oh man, that would be great. For Duty 16, we went to Guildhest enemy Strongholds, and the tank got their tank stance on once it was mentioned. It was also quite funny to see the group stand at the lever waiting for it to function while the backline had these guys to fight. For duty 17, we have another one of the new raid bosses, so if you don't want to see that, jump to this timestamp here. With that out of the way, we went to M4N against Wicked Thunder. Right at the start, I noticed that one of the healers had what appears to be an insanely impressive burst looking at their enmity. My guess was they might have some savage drops? I don't know, I didn't check. I also started to notice the fight felt like it really dragged on a bit, both in terms of seeing some repeat mechanics you don't always see repeated, but also by the final phase starting at like 20%, where I feel it often probably starts at like 15%, but I might remember that wrong. She also got to the third volley in that last phase. Aside from that, the fight definitely went just fine. For my mistakes, I noticed over the course of the fight that my jump slowly drifted out of lance charge. Obviously, I clearly let it drift like a GZD per refresh. The fact the fight has so many small timings where you may have to step out of melee range didn't help with this kind of alignment either. For duty 18, we went to the Great Hunt Extreme against Rathalos, as 3 mentors and 1 sprout healer. I got the impression the healer went into this without much knowledge of the fight, and might also have been rather new to Sage, as they didn't seem well prepared to do a lot of healing in the first phase, and might even have assumed healing didn't work at all, like it does in phase 2. This may have been part of the reason for our dancer unfortunately dying twice. The dancer also instructed the healer to use his Shuna more in phase 2, which they then did. You may recall from a previous episode that I mentioned how a single player can solo these stack markers. But if you actually have a healer ready to use a Shuna, it might not be a bad idea to take the stack as more than 1 person. If you do it with 3, it seems everyone can safely wait to use a potion until every second hit at least. This would cost 1 to 2 potions per person, which would hurt, but would also make it safer and easier to handle. This would only really be a problem if the fight drags on over long, but the fight is not long enough for this to be an issue normally. For duty 19, we went to Under the Armor again. I want you to know that the first Under the Armor in this set was like over 2 hours ago. And finally for duty 20, we finish with A11N, Cruise Chaser. Impressively, not much bad happened here. I was mildly surprised that anyone bothered to use a 2-minute cooldown on the trash packs leading up to the boss, but whatever, right? In the active time maneuver section of the fight, one of our tanks missed their ride and promptly died for it. And for the shield mechanic, we had both healers and the red mage attacking from the wrong side. For anyone who needs to hear this mechanic, you can only damage the shield from the front, which is really weird, I know, but that's how it is. Otherwise, it just does nothing. This set wasn't exactly the best with this many Guildhests, but it was at least better than last time. I do find it a bit concerning that it seems like it is becoming more common for players to just dip immediately when they see certain duties, whether they are mentors or otherwise. That just leads to a very unenjoyable experience for the first timers especially. And while indeed you don't owe them anything, I still feel you did queue up for this, maybe at least give it a chance before you dip. Now, while today's set still caused some insanity with the total tally of duties, it at least added a bit more to some of the more interesting options. I would also like to mention that the sheer amount of OGCDs leading into more OGCDs on Dragoon really does give the job a feeling of being a lot more intense than maybe it really is. I don't know, but it did feel like I was double weaving way more than most other jobs, even a job like Viper. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, originally you accessed the Life of the Dragon window by using Geisterkugel after having used Mirage Dive twice. When entering Life of the Dragon, the duration on this mode was actually determined by how much time was left on the Blood of the Dragon effect, which you maintained with Wheeling Thrust and Fang and Claw. However, in Shadowbringers, they made it so the Blood of the Dragon ability gave 30 seconds of duration, and given that this cooldown itself had a cooldown of like 25 seconds, it made maintaining this completely irrelevant. It also made it so Life of the Dragon naturally capped out to 30 seconds when initiated if memory serves. This is probably why you get 3 Nastrons specifically, because the original cooldown of
10 seconds meant that was the amount you would get.